Okay, we'll make a start. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We really appreciate you giving up your time to attend this Park House Connect session. As I mentioned, my name is Mrs. Walton. I'm the assistant head teacher of Key Stage 5, and Mrs. Allen is going to be delivering the presentation this evening. She is the head of sixth form and are very experienced, very expert in university and careers guidance. There is a Q&A session, a Q&A box open. So if you've got any questions throughout the session, please type them in the box and we'll answer any questions at the end. So if you could hold questions throughout the presentation, and then there'll be opportunity to ask that right at the end. And without further ado, Mrs. Allen, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're really going to focus on getting students ready to make applications to university and what things you may need to consider and discuss as a family, as well as looking at getting ready to start that new chapter of their lives for the year 13 students as well. So ideally, if your child is in year 11 and you want to get an idea of what you have coming up in the near future, please stay with us. And if your child is in year 12, then the first half of this presentation is super important for you in terms of discussing some things as a family in the immediate future. And if your child is in year 13, then there are a few things that you may wish to start discussing, or you may have already started discussing, that we can just highlight the importance of today. So, a few things that you may have already started considering if you are in year 11 or year 12 um, are related specifically to where you might want to go to university, looking at finances as a family and what the budgetary needs are that you may have already set out. Also looking at what courses your child might want to study. If your child's in year 11, you would have been choosing your options for A levels. And if you're in year 12, you've been doing your year 12 options for a while. So you are fully, at this point, have some clear idea as to what you may want to apply for over the next couple of months. Other additional things that I know that are very important to families is making sure that the academic standards, or if there are any family or friends in the location of your choice, so that your child could integrate into that country of choice seamlessly. So these are a few things that I'm sure as a family you've already started discussing. And it's just at this point to make sure those conversations continue so that you could allow your child to make a more informed choice, and one that suits your child's subjects needs and future career needs, as well as the needs of your family. So some common requirements for university admissions that we've discussed with students over the last year. So they probably mentioned a few of these to you, and you're probably aware of these yourself, but it's really important to have those at the forefront of our minds, especially for the next part of the presentation, where we'll start breaking down what things we might need to do in the immediate and in the long term. So one of the most common requirements for university admissions is the secondary high school transcript. Now, if your child leaves Park House after year 12, then they will require high school transcript that outline their reports and academic achievements from year 9 up to year 12. If they're leaving after year 13, then they will require a school transcript that starts from year 10 all the way to year 13. So we work together with the exams officer and with you to make sure that we collate all that information so it's ready to be sent off to the necessary universities. So one of the key things I've found over the years is making sure that you know where you've kept records of your child's previous schools if they've not been in Park House for the entirety of the last 4 years of their education, and making sure that those documents, school reports, etc., are at hand. If they're not at hand and you may have studied in a different country, then it's really important at this point to start thinking about how you can contact that school to get access to those records so that they're ready for when you make the application for your transcript. Commonly as well, most universities will require some sort of entrance test score. Due to COVID, a lot of these have been optional for the last few years, but as we are coming off the back of COVID, then we're seeing more and more universities requiring those entrance tests. And the entrance tests vary depending on which country you're applying to, and what courses you're doing as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Additionally, as well, a common requirement is a letter of motivation, or some of us know it as a personal statement, as well as essay prompts to support the student's application for the university. And we will also go into this one in a bit more detail as well. Recommendation letters and reference forms are done by the school, and it's really important that all those activities you've been encouraging your child to get involved in over the years, that if they've ever achieved any certificates for involvement in any of these activities, or if you can contact the organization to get a letter just to support the achievements your child has done as part of that activity, that would be great in support of their application. So that's something as well to start thinking about collating and making sure that you have at hand. Interviews as well are becoming more and more common, particularly because everyone's super comfortable with being on an online platform. Whereas before, interviews might have been a little bit more rare because people had to travel to the country to physically do the interview. But now, as we're more seamlessly using technology for multiple things, we're finding more and more of our students are asked to do online interviews. And if your child is in year 12 and continuing into year 13, one of the key things to also make sure you have a look at is whether or not they will get transfer credits for completing year 13, because that will go some way towards tailoring their university experience financially as well as subject wise, because they may have covered some of those topics in year 13 already, and then therefore they may be omitted from completing them in the first year of their university, so may get first semester credits. So that's something they can also look into. So these are the most common requirements for university applications that we start getting the year 12 students to think about and start preparing them to think about these things from when we started school in August. And now we've arrived at that time where some of these documents and some of these forms are now in the immediate future. And the main purpose of today is just highlighting some of those to you as well as parents, because we are aware that sometimes that information doesn't carry from the students to the parents. And it's just making sure that you're in a position to support them as much as you can and be as informed as possible. So a key thing that we'll be expecting students to start doing as of now, and I know most of the students have already started doing this because we've been doing it with them, is long listing and working on a short list as well of their university options. So in those conversations with you at home as to which country they would like to study in, but also as well which country you would like them to study in for whatever personal reasons you may have, they should all be in a position where they have got a long list, if not already a short list of university options. If they have not done this, and this is normally an ongoing process, then they should be using their Unifog login to compare universities, and to try to make sure that they've got as much information as possible to make that short list. Mrs. Wharton provided a presentation to the students a few weeks ago about how to use the Unifil platform to create those shortlists, and they could make reference to that should they need to, or pop in and see one of us and we'll talk them through it. But it is quite straightforward. The great thing about that as well is they can share that short list or that long list with you as parents for you to sit down and discuss, and it will compare things like tuition fees, accommodation, etc. Another thing that we would expect students to be doing now before they get into exam season, which is right around the corner, is to have some idea of the general prerequisite grades or subject requirements. And so for each country and each university, they may have specific grade requirements for a particular course. So, for example, if I wanted to study mechanical engineering in Canada, for example, I would need physics, and the university might specifically say I need physics at a C grade or above. Whereas if I was doing mechanical engineering in another country, they may say I need physics and maths at C grade or above. And it's really important in terms of getting ready to make these applications when you were in year 12 to have that idea going into the exams of what kind of grade requirements and subject requirements that we may need to meet. I always find that it's a really good tool for focusing a student's effort when you have that conversation with them and you say, okay, well, you definitely need to work a little bit harder because you have to make sure you get that C or above in physics. Otherwise, you won't be able to apply to, this university of your choice, etc. And as parents, it's also a good way to help motivate them at home and just remind them of what they may need in order to make sure that they're ready for making those applications. Now, those are the two key things that we expect and support our students to do before the exams start. Because the key thing, obviously, is not to burden them with too much prior to the exam, because the key focus should be ensuring that they have a good study program in place to achieve the outcomes that they are capable of doing. So those two things are the key things we would like them to have at the forefront or the back of their minds and have noted down somewhere so that when the exams are finished and they return to school for the last 3 weeks of term, the year 12s come back. And during that time when they come back, there are a few supportive measures that we carry out as a sixth form team. The main one being that each year 12 student will have a one-to-one union careers guidance meeting with myself and Mrs. Walton in the last couple of weeks of term, where we get them to complete an action plan of things that they need to, basically like a little checklist that they need to achieve over the next couple of months, to ensure that once they start year 13, the majority of these things can be put in place to make that transition into year 13 that little bit easier and take a lot of the pressure off the university application process once they start year 13. Additionally, one of the things that we encourage students to do after the exam, and they will be given supportive guidance on this, is drafting an initial version of their motivation letter or drafting answers to the Common App essay prompt responses for the US. So most universities will either want a motivation letter or they will have specific questions they encourage students to answer in support of their application. And most of these questions, for example, on screen, you'll see the Common App essay prompts for the 2023-2024 applications, and that's already been released. So we would expect and encourage our students to start preparing draft responses of these questions over the next few months after their exams, so over the summer, a little bit like summer homework, really. Just putting together drafts of that. So once they get back to school, they can start sharing that with their tutor and getting some feedback on what they may need to do to improve that. So one of the things we encourage students to do as well during the summer months in particular, where they have that additional downtime, is to complete a MOOC. And a MOOC is a massive open online course. I always encourage them to do more than one because MOOCs tend to be short courses, which could be anything from 2 weeks to 10, 12-week courses, and they're delivered by universities all around the world. And students can get a certification for participation and active completion of doing the online course. And it is a wonderful addition to their university application because they've had that exposure to university style lectures, as well as small university style assignments and discussions. The majority of these can be completed for free, and I think in most cases, the only thing you do have to pay for is the certificate at the end if you would like a hard copy. So students can actually find examples of MOOCs in their Unifrog, and there's an actual dedicated section in Unifrog that gives a list of MOOCs being delivered online from various platforms, which then allows them to pick and choose what MOOC they would like to do and for what duration. And a couple of other examples that I personally like to use for completing MOOCs are FutureLearn and edX. And they always have a wide range of topics um, of study to explore. And they're even great for you as parents to possibly find one that you can do alongside your child and do one together. And that could be a really nice experience for the family to get involved in doing a MOOC at the same time. And it could be in any topic of your choice. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to do a MOOC in the topic or the pathway you're planning on going to university to study. It may show variety and depth if you encourage your child to take on board a MOOC in another area so they can explore something new. And on your screen, you'll just see an example of some MOOCs from Future Learn um, that I thought were quite interesting. Again, I mentioned earlier about entrance exams. And in the aftermath of completing their AS exams, that time is really golden time to start researching, booking, and preparing for any standard entrance exams that they may have to do, particularly the SAT or the ACT. I know those get booked up really quickly in Qatar. So if in your child's research, the university does say they may need to provide an SAT or ACT score, then the time during the summer is perfect to encourage them to spend maybe a day a week, depending on how confident they're feeling with the material, to try and familiarize themselves with the style of questions and complete a paper or two practice. That way, they can start the new academic year having either already completed the SAT or the ACT or being ready to do so. And it really does depend on what their pathway is. So, for example, if your child is planning on applying for medicine in the UK, they may have to complete the BMAT or the UK CAT, and that does require some preparation, similarly with the LNAT. So that time immediately after the exams is, as I said, perfect time to find out more, do the research, book the exam to make sure you have the space, and then just making sure that some preparatory work is completed during the summer, ready to start the new academic year. And we will provide a copy of the presentation with the links to the websites where you book the different exams. And the last thing that we will be doing with the Year 12 students in particular is registering them on the country-specific application platform if it is open already. So, for example, UCAS, if they're applying to the UK, the UCAS platform opens up, I think it's the end of May, beginning of June for the following academic year. So we can actually get them registered and start completing the majority of the UCAS application form before they've even finished this academic year. So this is really one of the reasons why we encourage our students to come back after the exam so we can use that time to really spend uninterrupted time just focusing on making sure that we're getting them ready with their university applications before they start year 13, so as much of it is done this side of things, so they can start their year 13 with not as much on their plate as they would do if they don't commit to attempting to do some of this preparatory work beforehand. The Canada and Netherlands application platforms open a bit later on, so they may not be able to start the registration process for those applications just yet. But in our conversations, we will make sure that we let them know what documentation they will need so they could start putting those together, saving them in a specific folder, and being ready to upload those as soon as those platforms are open. So for the year 12 students, sorry, for the year 12 students, these are the things in terms of getting ready and prepared for making the university applications that we would be expecting them to be engaging with, and we will be supporting them with before the exams and after the exams. And if we could just keep having that support from the home perspective as well, and as you are engaging those discussions with your child and questions come up, please definitely get in contact with us and we can help continuing to support you so that during the summer months, if you're carrying out any university prep, that you do have as much information as possible to make that a seamless exercise. Right, so that's where we're at in terms of preparing the year 12 students for their university applications and making sure that we streamline that process. I'll now discuss what our suggestions, I guess, are for the year 13 students in terms of ensuring they're prepared to make that final leap in their education and going off to, be the independent young adults that we've all been working towards supporting them in becoming. So if your child is in year 13, the big change that you're probably already starting to notice just in terms of their applications, etc., is yes, you are still the bank of mom and dad, but also they're having to make a lot more decisions for themselves, and a lot of the information coming directly from the universities is to them and not necessarily to you. So at the moment, um, as parents of an under 18 student in the school, there's that support between the school and the parents to support the student as they're carrying out the educational journey. And the massive shift that you will notice as parents is that changes to being between the university and the student because they are young adults and they have to start utilizing all those skills that you've worked so hard in instilling in them to thrive on their own, and universities support that. So you kind of get bypassed a lot, and it's just really important to make sure that in conversations with your child, you're encouraging them to share the communications that they get in from the university with you, and that this process continues throughout their university journey. So, as they're about to break out of their nice, comfortable bubble, and one of the good things about living in Qatar is that it is so safe. And I do know that we do have lots of parents who the realization as we approach exams, the realization that their child will be leaving home shortly is really starting to hit home as their university offers start coming through. And one of the main things is, I think, just having those conversations about anything that you're worried about as parents with your child to alleviate those feelings because they may also be feeling the same, and just keep those lines of communication open. So I'm quite sure many of you have already started the process of a lot of the things that I'm going to mention. And if you haven't, now this is a great opportunity for you to start thinking about those things. And the key things that you're going to have to start doing probably in the next couple of months is thinking about the visa application processes for the country that your child will choose to go to. So I know a lot of our students have been receiving their offers over the last few months, and they're now at that position for quite a few students where they're having to make that choice of which country, which course, which university, because universities will start asking in some cases for a tuition deposit to secure their space in the university. So it's important to start, if you haven't done so already, researching what the visa application process may be for the country of your family's choice. Because you may have to collate certain documents, and you may have to send messages to your home country to get certain documents sent to you, and you want to make sure that you have everything you need in sufficient time so that the process doesn't take longer than necessary. As I mentioned, universities once the universities have started giving out the majority of their offers, they will start sending messages to um, ask for the tuition fee deposit. And one of the key things is also to start having those conversations with your child about what their maintenance allowance or financial support packages from your side will look like, so they could start thinking about budgeting in terms of what their life might look like when they're at university. Accommodation is really important because it goes so quickly at universities throughout the world. I know, for example, our students who are applying to go to university in the Netherlands, getting accommodation is always a challenge because they're short on accommodation in a lot of locations in the Netherlands, and they may not get their first, second, or even third choice accommodation. So applying for their accommodation once you've decided on your country of choice is important, and it's probably one of the first things that you need to do as soon as you've made that decision is put in your child's name in for their first choice accommodation, and then hoping that that goes through. One of the key things I think that a lot of times we overlook and fail to, I guess, thoroughly discuss with students is what life sort of looks like without parents, and getting them ready for what life will be like in Europe, America, Canada, or indeed if they're staying in Qatar, because they may have been to these places, whether it's their home country or on a holiday, but you know, it's always a different experience when you go somewhere on holiday for a couple of weeks and then when you have to live there. So if you have experience yourself of living in that particular country that your child may be going to, I definitely encourage you to start having those conversations about your own experiences of being in that country, or if you know people in your friendship groups who have been in that particular country, get them to start speaking to your child about their first-hand experiences. The great thing is there's so much you can find out about the internet from the internet, but it's always nice to have that sit down and have that one-to-one with an actual person as opposed to just their opinions on Google. Healthcare and insurance is going to be something that you should start researching as well, just in terms of assessing the cost of that. Some universities will provide support in terms of suggestions for healthcare and insurance whilst your child's at university, but you may find that you may be able to arrange something more suitable for yourself. So that's definitely something that you should also independently research. Um, as well as spending some time researching student bank accounts, because not all student bank accounts are created equal, and some may provide benefits that may be more suited to your child's requirements than others. And now is as good a time as any to start exploring what student bank accounts look like in the country of your family's choice. I guess the key thing, even as you start in the visa application process, if you haven't already got your visa, you probably will still need to think about this. If you don't need a visa, you still definitely need to bear in mind when will your child arrive in the country of choice for university. All universities will provide an orientation program. So I would highly recommend that when deciding your flights, that you try to make sure that you're there in good time to give your child a couple of days to settle. And if you're traveling with them to settle, then you guys have that time to settle in together, as well as giving them that time to access the orientation program. Hopefully, all these applications go through smoothly, and then, once you know that you've guaranteed your visa application is going well, then it makes it a little bit easier to plan when you can leave, but definitely have some idea of when you would like to arrive in the country of your choice, even before the visa process is finalized, so you have a key date to work around. As I said, a lot of these things you probably are already working on, and are already putting in place. And as a school, if there's anything we can do to support with documentation from the school side, then definitely please do let us know, and we will try our best to provide any documentation from our side that we can. An important point to note, I always think, is that the student services and guidance at the university of your choice is really, really good in most cases because they're designed to provide that additional support to incoming students to make sure that they're able to transition positively. So if you find yourself stuck in terms of being able to provide a particular document or have a particular question that's specific to that university, 100% reach out to the student services branch of the university of your choice. So over the next 6 months, there are a few additional things that you could be working with your child on, and those include deciding what to take, which I know a lot of people find ridiculously hard because you don't want to forget something that's important, or you think, okay, I'll just buy a new one, but you might be attached to what you already have. So it's really important to start, once exams are finished, to start thinking about what's important to take and what you may want to leave behind, or what, as parents, you may be able to bring on your next visit. And I would definitely suggest you encourage your child to start doing any reading that they can before they start the university course. So once they've got all their admissions papers through, most universities will provide a reading list. Um, and one of the things I think is never done enough is students taking advantage of having the reading list early to start familiarizing themselves with some of the material. So I definitely think it's important that you encourage them to maybe pick one or two of the things from the reading list and start just familiarizing themselves with that because it will really help their transition to university. Um, this tip is from last year's alumni. And one of the things I was speaking to a few students from last year, and one of the key things that they said they wish they'd spend time doing is learning to cook their mom or dad's favorite dishes that they loved them cooking, but they never learned to do it themselves. And then they felt homesick because they missed that. So I thought I'd put that in there today because I thought that's one of the things you could do together as a family that would be really nice and also support that feeling and that connectiveness to home if your child learns to cook their favorite dishes. And something else that you can do as a family as well is using the internet to look at how your child could get around the country they're about to live in, whether it's going to be feasible for them to get around using the train networks or cars or public transport or walking, um, just having that familiarity and that expectation of how they get around in a new city or refamiliarize themselves with the city they may have been in before. Seem to have disappeared there. It's okay, I'm back. And just the last thing from me there is just try and spend as much time together as you can. And I know that becomes increasingly difficult when you've got an 18-year-old in your house who has their own ideas of how they want to spend their time. But you definitely need to try to make the next few months living in the same home with your son or daughter as special as you can, as you prepare for that transition of them moving on towards university. So that's the last thing from me today in terms of the things that you may already be thinking of or should be thinking. Hello. Yes, I seem to have dropped from the meeting at the last moment there, but I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you've got any questions at all, please drop them in the Q&A, and myself and Mrs. Walton will answer them now. Or if you go away and think about something you'd like to ask us later on, please definitely feel free to do so, and I will share our email addresses if you don't already have them.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Allen, for that presentation. And what a great tip about learning to cook your favorite dishes from your parents before you go to university. Um, I think I feel as though I should have learned to cook my parents' favorite dishes before I moved to Qatar because I still can't do it. So that's really great advice. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the Q&A now and we'd be happy to answer them. We'll just wait online for a few more minutes to see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. This recording will be sent out to you if there's anything you'd like to go over. So unless you have any questions, thank you very much. If you do have any questions, just drop them in the Q&A now and we will answer them for you.